This is a situation where we have multiple threats. And remember, we have threats that are challenging us not just economically and strategically, but in many other ways through their building alliances with other countries. I think that is incredibly challenging. We know that military planners are taught to plan from big to small, and we have to look at this in how we go about planning to deter future aggression. I would argue the aggression's happening today, but if you look at agreements like AUKUS, which I think are incredibly enabling for the United States and others, we look too at the opportunities that are there for us with nations in the region. I had the chance to travel to the Indo-Pacific during the August break, went and visited with Japan, with the Philippines, with President Tsai in Taiwan, went to Australia as part of the Australian-American Legislative Dialogue. Great conversations there. We know this for certain, folks. Let's not call it anything than what it is. China is an adversary. This is not a strategic competition. China is an adversary. Their desire is to dominate the world. They have no interest in a co-equal relationship. They want to dominate the world. Let's make sure that we call that for what it is. We know, too, that they are on track to have a naval fleet of 460 ships by 2030. You know, it used to be we'd say, oh, don't worry about it. You know, they may have more ships than we have, but their ships aren't as good as ours. Folks, if you look at the Liu Yang destroyer, that ship is every bit as good as an Arleigh Burke. That'll scare the bejeebies out of us. So they're not only going to have quantity, they're also developing quality. So they get it. The way we counter that is through partnerships. You know, we have great allies in the region, and I'm really, really enthused by what's happening there. Japan's doubling their defense budget. If you look at what the Philippines is doing now in cooperation with the United States, helping us pre-position supplies, places like the old Subic Bay, Clark Air Force Base properties there, great opportunities for us. Look at what Taiwan is doing. Had great meetings with President Tsai. They're increasing their required military service from 4 months to 12 months. They're sending their soldiers here to the United States to be trained. All of those are good things. We have to counter China in an incredibly challenging environment here at home. You know, we have a national debt now that's approaching $34 trillion. If you look at where the national debt has gone in the last 364 days, it's increased by $2.46 trillion, folks, trillion dollars. If you look by the beginning of the second quarter of next year, the interest on the national debt will approach $1 trillion. The way we deter the Chinese is we have to get more per our dollar than they get per their yuan. It's plain and simple. We cannot out-resource them like we did in the Cold War. We won the Cold War because Russia just ran out of money and ran out of innovation and creation. Two things that we had plenty of. We've got plenty of innovation and creation today, but we do not have an excess of dollars. And I argue dollars will start to crowd out the things that we need to do. That's why we have to make sure we have strong partnerships with our allies. We have to make sure when we buy things, we buy them smartly. We have to make sure we buy things in multiples. So if we do multi-year procurement, we can bring costs down. We can assure, too, certainty for the industrial base. We can ensure to them through the demand signal from the Pentagon that we are going to buy these things, which helps them provide economies of scale. I think that those things are incredibly important, as well as leveraging private equity and venture capital dollars. We cannot do this as a single government-sponsored entity. There's a lot of money out there that wants to get into this space. We have to send the proper demand signal and make sure we have thoughtful structures for those things to happen. The Defense Innovation Unit's doing great work. Doug Beck came there from Apple Computer, working really hard. Dr. Jason Rathje over the Office of Strategic Capital doing a lot to leverage private equity in that space. How do we look at other aspects of what we have to do? Let's look at where we are with Joint Force Aviation. We've got lots of great opportunities there, but we also have vulnerabilities. If you look at the things that we have to address, we have many of our weapon systems, we have limited range. We're getting outsticked by the Chinese in many of those areas. And the problem is our magazine depth is very, very small. So not only do we have not as many weapons as we need, we use those mostly in the beginning of the conflict, and then we are, as the term goes, Winchester, and then the Chinese have that significant advantage. I want to make sure, too, that we have the ability to do logistics in theater. You know, we have to be able to operate at distance. We have the tyranny of distance in that space. We have to make sure we can do logistics. We want to make sure too that we can do simple things like aerially refuel. Having modern aircraft to be able to do that is key. We want to make sure too that we are keeping up with our peer competitors. And the way we close the gap with that, folks, is to make sure we have a full slate of capabilities there. Let's start with the F-35. You know, the F-35 is an incredibly capable platform. It's going to be critical to the carrier air wing, but it has to have the most recent software update. TR3 is going to be key. And I would argue the F-35 is the case that everyone should look at across the Pentagon and say, this is a learning experience for us. And that is the enterprise in the Pentagon, and for that matter across DoD, needs to start with software. DoD enterprise needs to be a software-enabled, a software-informed effort, and then have the hardware follow from there. Because great example is F-35. Great hardware platform, does incredible things, but it gets enabled by software. We have an aircraft of roughly $100 million a piece that in some instances is only 55% enabled because we're waiting for software upgrades. TR3 won't be delivered again after the third cancellation until the middle of next year. We have to do better if we're going to get full operational capability out of that aircraft. I want to make sure too that we expand the things that platform can do. We have more weapons capability, more jamming capability, more weapons capability, but it can only do that with upgraded software. And then we know that the fourth block of that aircraft has incredible capability, but it's only going to be enabled if we do the software. I think that those things are absolutely critical for us in the endeavor going forward. I want to make sure too that we have the ability for us to extend our F-18s in the carrier's air group, in the carrier strike group. We do that by MQ-25. That platform has the ability for us to do tanking at distance. That platform can also do sensing, can also do jamming. So in addition to making sure we have F-35 that has a full capability, having that tanking capability lets us operate at distance, and we can stay outside of the range of some of the extended range weapons that the Chinese have. We look at F-18Es and Fs, we have to finish the production of F-15Es and Fs. We have a remaining contract with Boeing that originally started as 20 aircraft. It probably won't end up with that, but there's still back and forth about the agreement to get that executed. The agreement is around how do we make sure that there's a proper sharing of intellectual property. I think there's a good place to be there for the Navy and for Boeing. We need to get there.